So I'm doing this live stream. Um, I'm gonna read the Duke and I, chapter 5. And wait, let me just go. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better. Okay, so I'm gonna read the Duke and I don't know. I'm gonna read the Duke and I, chapter 5. Um, it's not the same as Bridgerton. Okay, this lighting is a little bit. I don't know. Hold on. Okay, so keep in mind, it is not the same as the book, as the movie. The book is not exactly the same as the show on Netflix, Bridgerton. So it's backwards, but Duke and I have summaries on my page um, up until chapter 4. But I'm gonna read chapter 5. Hopefully, I can get through it pretty fast. Chapter 4, which I summarize, I have like a minute summary on here. Um, what you need to know is at the end of chapter 4, the Duke of Hastings made the offer, the deal, the proposal to Daphne about entering into a ruse, like they're dating, so that she can have more prospects because Anthony's a bear and he can avoid the matchmaking mamas. So, and I'm not going to read it in the accent, so y'all could dead that. I'm going to read it like how I read. And I'm sure I'm going to fumble over some stuff, but y'all bear with me, okay? Please get the book. Again, it's not the same. There are some little differences. I did do a blog post about the little differences, lightbee.com. So please check that out and we'll get started. Okay. Were you at Lady Danbury's ball last night? If not, shame on you. You missed witnessing quite the most remarkable coup of the season. It was clear to all partygoers, and especially to this author, that Miss Daphne Bridgerton has captured the interest of the newly returned to England Duke of Hastings. One can only imagine the relief of Lady Bridgerton. How mortifying it will be if Daphne remains on the shelf for yet another season. And Lady B with 3 more daughters to marry off. Oh, the horror. I just hear her being so dramatic. Um, who's Julia Andrews' voice? Now I hear that. Before I didn't have a voice in my head, but now after watching Bridgerton, I actually have a voice in my head. Lady Whistledown Society Papers, the 30th of April, 1813. Okay, so remember, this picks up where he was like, yo, let's. Her mother was impaling her with her deadly "I am your mother. Don't you dare defy me" gaze. Secondly, the Duke had clearly not given Anthony the entire story of their meeting in the dimly lit hallway. To make a show of refusing to dance with him would certainly raise undue speculation. Not to mention, okay, let me pause here. I think he just asked her to dance. He hasn't made the proposal yet. Okay, I'm getting my chapters mixed up. He just asked her to dance. He hasn't made not the proposal, he hasn't made the offer yet. So remember when she met him, uh, if you guys saw Bridgerton, it's a little different and it's actually quite comical. So when she met him, uh, she actually punched the weird guy that tried to get engaged with her. Lord, I forget his name, but when they mention it, I'll let you know. Okay, so secondly, the Duke had clearly not given Anthony the entire story of their meeting in the dimly lit hallway. To make a show of refusing to dance with him would certainly raise undue speculation. Not to mention that Daphne really didn't particularly relish getting drawn into a conversation with the Featheringtons, which was sure to happen if she didn't make immediate haste for the dance floor. All right. And finally, sort of, just a teeny bit, actually wanted to dance with the Duke. So she was feeling him a little bit. Okay. Of course, the arrogant boor didn't even give her the chance to accept. Before Daphne could manage and "I'd be delighted" or even a mere "yes," he had her halfway across the room. Okay, so this is he just asked her to dance. All right. The orchestra was still producing those awful noises it makes while the musicians were getting ready to begin. So they were forced to wait a moment before. "Thank God you didn't refuse," the Duke said with great feeling. "When would I have had the opportunity?" He grinned at her. Daphne answered with a scowl. "I wasn't given the opportunity to accept either, if you recall." He raised a brow. "Does that mean I must ask you again?" "No, of course not," Daphne replied, rolling her eyes. "That would be rather childish of me, don't you think? And besides, it would cause a terrible scene which I don't think either of us desires." He cocked his head and gave her a rather assessing glance, as if he had analyzed her personality in an instant and decided she might just be acceptable. Daphne found the experience somewhat unnerving. Just then, the orchestra ceased its discordant warm up and struck the first notes of the waltz. So, what I loved about the movie, pause, what I loved about the Netflix show was the modernization, was the classical mix and modern of the music. It was just so like pretty and transported you, but kept you, you know? So now that I'm reading this again, it's like with the Bridgerton, the Netflix series, like it's with a whole new vibe. Anyway, where was I? Okay. Simon groaned. "Do young ladies still need permission to waltz?" Daphne found herself smiling at his discomfort. "How long have you been away?" Because he just came from being away, because uh, he left when his father was starting to warm up to him, and then he only came back because his father died. Same thing as the Netflix series. 5 years, do they? Yes. Do you have it? He looked almost pained at the prospect of his escape plan falling apart. Of course. He swept her into his arm and whirled her into the. "Did you reveal to my brothers? I saw you with them, you know." Um, oh, I hope this is still recording. Okay. Said unstable connection, which I have no idea why. All right. Uh, they had, okay, I already did that. "What are you grinning?" Simon only grinned. "What are you grinning about?" She asked suspiciously. "I was merely marveling at your restraint." "I beg your pardon?" He shrugged slightly, his shoulders rising as his head tilted to the right. "I hadn't thought you the most patient of ladies," he said. "And here I took you a full 3.5 minutes before asking me about my conversations with your brother." Daphne fought a blush. The truth was, the Duke was a most accomplished dancer, and she'd been enjoying the waltz too much to even think of conversation. "But since you asked," he said, mercifully sparing her from having to make a comment, "all I told them was that I ran into you in the hall and that, given your coloring, I instantly recognized you as a Bridgerton and introduced myself." Lies. The meeting was, I believe, when she punched, maybe his name was Nigel. I'm reading this again, and for the life of me, I do not remember his name. When she punched that dude, because he was okay, yeah, because he was drunk and stuff, and trying to like basically manhandle her. So she punched him, and then Simon ended up punching him too. So that happened a little bit differently than in the series. Anyway, Uh, "Do you think they believed you?" "Yes," he said softly. "I rather think they did. Not that in this piece it is most certainly Nigel." Oh, yeah, his name was Nigel. "Of course." She chewed on her lower lip. "Do you think he's still out in the hall?" They left him in the hall, y'all. They left him slumped in the hall, like knocked out. "I certainly have no intention of finding out." There was an awkward moment of silence, and then Daphne said, "It has been some time since you attended a London ball, has it not? Nigel and I must have been quite a welcome." "You were a welcome sight. He was not." She smiled slightly at the compliment. "Aside from our little escapade, have you been enjoying your evening?" Simon answered her. Simon's answer was so unequivocally in the negative that he actually snorted a laugh before saying it. "Really?" Daphne replied, her brows arching with curiosity. "Now that is interesting. You find my agony interesting? Remind me never to turn to you should I ever fall ill." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "It can't have been that bad. Oh, it can. Certainly not as bad as my evening. You did look rather miserable with your mother and Macclesfield. Macclesfield. Lord," he allowed. "How kind of you to point it out," she muttered. "But I still think my evening was worse." Daphne laughed, a light musical sound that warmed Simon's bones. Warmed his bones. Ooh, child. "What a sad pair we are," she said. "Surely we can manage a conversation on a topic other than our respective terrible evenings." Simon said nothing. Daphne said nothing. "Well, I can't think of anything," he said. Daphne laughed again, this time with more gaiety, and Simon once again found himself mesmerized by her. So he had been attracted to her um, at this point. She echoed, tilting her head as she looked at him. This grows even more interesting. I can think I can think of any number of adjectives to describe all of the whom's I have had the pleasures of meeting in this evening, but interesting is not one of them. Okay, so this is chapter 5. They're dancing, and he's about to tell her about all the mamas that be trying to make him meet their daughters and stuff like that. Now, she chided, "Don't be rude. I did see you chatting with my brothers after all." He nodded gallantly, tightening his hand slightly at her waist as they swung around in a graceful arc. "My apologies. The Bridgertons are, of course, excluded from my insults. We we are all relieved, I'm sure." Simon cracked a smile at her Deadpan wit. "I live to make Bridgertons happy." "Now, that is a statement that may come back to haunt you," she chided. "But in all seriousness, what has you in such a dither? If your evening has gone that far downhill since our interlude with Nigel, you're in sad straits indeed." "How shall I put this," he mused, "so that I do not completely offend you?" "Oh, go right ahead," she said blithely. "I promise not to be offended." Simon grinned wickedly, "A statement that may come back to haunt you." She blushed slightly. The color was barely noticeable in the shadowy candlelight, but Simon had been watching her closely. She didn't say anything, however, so he added, "Very well. If you must know, I have been introduced to every single unmarried lady in the ballroom." A strange snorting sound came from the vicinity of her mouth. Let me go on to stop. Simon had, so he continued, been introduced to all of their mothers. She gurgled. She actually gurgled. "Bad show," he scolded, "laughing at your dance partner." "I'm sorry," she said, her lips tight from trying not to smile. "No, you're not." "All right," she admitted, "I'm not, but only because I have had to suffer the same torture for 2 years. It's difficult to summon too much pity for a mere evening's worth. Why don't you just find someone to marry and put yourself out of your misery?" She shot him a sharp look. "Are you asking?" Simon felt the blood leave his face. "I thought not." She took one look at him and let out an impatient exhale. "Oh, for goodness sake, you can start breathing now, Your Grace. I was only teasing." Simon wanted to make some sort of dry, cutting, and utterly ironic comment, but the truth was she had so startled him that he couldn't utter a word. To answer your question, she continued, her voice a touch more brittle than he was accustomed to hearing from her, a lady must consider her options. There is Nigel, of course, but I think we must agree he is not a suitable candidate. Hell no, he not. I imagine him just like they portrayed him on Bridgerton, just gross and ugh, slimy. Simon shook his head. Earlier this year, there was Lord Chalmers, or Chalmers. Chalmers, he found. Isn't he on the darker side of 60? Oh, child. Yes. And since I would someday like to have children, it seemed some men that age can still sire brats, Simon pointed out. It wasn't a risk I was prepared to take, she returned. Besides, she shuddered slightly, a look of revulsion passing over her features. I didn't particularly care to have children with him. Yeah, with that. Much to his annoyance, Simon found himself picturing Daphne in bed with the elderly Chalmers. That's what we're going to go with, okay? It was a disgusting image and it left him feeling faintly furious. Well, he met her one night and he's jealous. Like, come on. But he's not going to acknowledge that he likes her. Okay. At whom he didn't know, maybe at himself for even bothering to imagine the damn thing. But before Lord Chalmers, Daphne continued, thankfully interrupting his rather unpleasant thought process, there were two others, both just as repulsive. That's a dang shame because it's so important for them to get married. And apparently, she's been out for 2 seasons. She is well on her way to being a Spencer. Is that what they call it? She's well on her way. Okay. Do you want? Okay, so right. Simon looked at her thoughtfully. Do you want to marry? Well, of course. Her face registered her surprise. Doesn't everyone? I don't. Typical. She smiled condescendingly. You think you don't. All men think they don't, but you will. No, he said emphatically. I will never marry. She gaped at him. Something in the Duke's tone of voice told her that he truly meant what he said. What about your title? Simon shrugged. What about it? If you don't marry and sire an heir, it will expire or go to some beastly cousin. That caused him to raise an amused brow. And how do you know that my cousins are beastly? All cousins who are next in line for a title are beastly. She cocked her head in a mischievous manner, or at least they are, according to the men who actually possess the title. And this is information. Of course. Simon was silent for a moment, and then he asked, is it worth it? She looked bemused by his sudden change of subject. Is what worth it? He let go of her hand just long enough to wave at the crowd. This, this endless parade of parties, your mother nipping at your heels. Daphne let out a surprised chuckle. I doubt she'd appreciate the metaphor. She fell silent for a moment, her eyes taking a faraway look as she said, but yes, I suppose it is worth it. It has to be worth it. She snapped back to attention and looked back to his face, her dark eyes meltingly honest. I want a husband. I want a family. It is not so silly when you think about it. I am fourth of 8 children. All I know are large families. I shouldn't know how to exist outside of one. Simon caught her gaze, his eyes burning hot and intense into hers. A warning bell sounding in his mind. He wanted her. He wanted her so desperately. He was straining against his clothes. Okay, that means he's getting hard. Oh, well, on the dance floor, y'all. Is that how it went back then? But he could never, ever so much as touch her because to do so would be to shatter every last one of her dreams. And rake or not, Simon wasn't certain he could live with himself if he did that. He would never marry, never sire a child, and that was all she wanted out of life. He might enjoy her company. He wasn't certain he could deny himself that, but he had to leave her untouched for another man. Your Grace, she asked quietly. When he blinked, she smiled and said, You were wool gathering. He inclined his head graciously, merely pondering your words. And did they meet your approval? Actually, it's good to know what you want out of life. Do you know what you want? Ah, how to answer that? Just in case anybody. All right, that's what we're reading. Ah, how to answer that? There were some things he knew he could not say, but it was easy to talk to this girl. Something about her put his mind at ease. Even as his body tingled with desire. By all rights, they should not have been having such a frank conversation so soon into an acquaintance, but somehow it just felt natural. That's how it be when you meet like the one or somebody you can really get along with or something like that. It just flows, it just feels natural. So I'm not surprised. Finally, he just said, I made some decisions when I was younger. I try to live my life according to those vows. She looked ravenously curious, but good manners prevented her from questioning him any further. My goodness, she said with slightly forced smile. We've grown serious. And here I thought all we meant to debate was whose evening was less pleasant. They were both trapped, Simon realized, trapped by their society's conventions and expectations. And that's when an idea popped into his mind, a strange, wild, and appallingly wonderful idea. It was probably also a dangerous idea, since it would put him in her company for long periods of time, which would certainly leave him in a personal state of unfulfilled desire. But Simon valued his self control above all else, and he was certain he could control his baser urges. Um, when has that worked out for a dude? Like, when? Ever? That move? She echoed bemusedly. Even as they twirled across the floor, she looked from side to side. From this? Not precisely. This you'd still have to endure. What I envision is more of a respite from your mother. Daphne choked on her surprise. You're going to remove my mother from the social world? Doesn't that seem a touch extreme? I'm not talking about removing your mother. Rather, I want to remove you. Daphne tripped over her feet, and then, just as soon as she regained her balance, she tripped over his. I beg your pardon? I had hoped to ignore London society altogether, he explained, but I'm finding that may prove to be impossible because you've suddenly developed a taste for ratifia, ratifia. I don't even know what that is. I have to look that up. And weak lemonade. Let's Google that because I don't know what that is. I know. Sorry. Oh, it's a champagne. Okay. Is it? Oh, yeah, it is a champagne. Ratifé. It's a champagne. Okay. Where was I? All right. Because you suddenly developed a taste for ratifé and weak lemonade, she quipped. No, he said, ignoring her sarcasm, because I discovered that half of my university friends married in my absence, and their wives seem to be obsessed with throwing the perfect party. And you've been invited. He nodded grimly. Daphne leaned in close, as if she were about to tell him a great secret. You're a duke, she whispered. You can say no. She watched with fascination as his jaw tightened. These men, he said, they're husbands. They are my friends. Like just a twinge? That was unnecessary. Well, I'll be, she said mischievously. You might just be a nice person after all. I'm hardly nice, he scoffed. Perhaps, but you're hardly cruel either. How many more pages I have to go? Because I'm only trying to do an hour. Oh, not much. Okay. The music drew to a close, and Simon took her arm and guided her to the perimeter of the ballroom. Their dance had deposited them on the opposite side of the room from Daphne's family, so they had time to continue their conversation as they walked slowly back to the Bridgertons. What I was trying to say, he said, before you so skillfully diverted me, was that it appears I must attend a certain number of London events. Hardly a fate worse than death. He ignored her editorial. You, I gather, must attend them as well. She gave him a single regal nod. Perhaps there is a way that I might be spared the attentions of the Featheringtons and the like, and at the same time you might be spared the matchmaking efforts of your mother. She looked at him intently. Go on. He leaned forward, his eyes mesmerizing hers, will form an attachment. This is when they do the fake relationship thing, the relationship fake out. Daphne said nothing, absolutely nothing. She just stared at him as if she were trying to decide if he were the rudest man on the face of the earth or simply mad in the head. Not a true attachment, Simon said impatiently. Good God, what sort of man do you think I am? Well, I was warned about your reputation, she pointed out, and you yourself tried to terrify me with your rakish ways. She patted his arm. But I forgive you. I'm sure you couldn't help it. Simon gave her a startled look. I don't believe I have ever been condescended to by a woman before. She shrugged. It was probably past time. Do you know, I'd thought that you were unmarried because your brothers had scared off all your suitors, but now I wonder if you did it all on your own. Ooh, he's funny. Much to his surprise, she just laughed. No, she said, I'm unmarried because everyone sees me as a friend. No one ever has any romantic interest in me. She grimaced, except Nigel. Yeah, Nigel gross, child. Mm-mm. Simon pondered her words for a few moments, then realized that his plan could work to her benefit even more than he'd originally imagined. Listen, he said, and listen quickly because we're almost back to your family, and Anthony looks as if he's about to bolt in our direction any minute now. They both glanced quickly to the right. Anthony was still trapped in a conversation with the Featheringtons. He did not look happy. Here's my plan, Simon continued, his voice low and intense. We shall pretend to have developed a tender for each other. I won't have to I won't have to quit so many debutantes thrown in my direction. Oh, I read that wrong. I won't have quite so many debutantes thrown in my direction because it will be perceived that I am no longer available. No, it won't, Daphne replied. They won't believe you're unavailable until you're standing up before the bishop taking your vows. Ooh, it's fair game until you marry, child. They will go after you. That's what she's saying. Kind of like now. That ain't changed. The very thought made his stomach churn. Nonsense, he said. It may take a bit of time, but I'm sure I will eventually be able to convince society that I am not anyone's candidate for marriage. Except mine, Daphne pointed out. I am. Well, then, what do I gain? Well, you gain a lot, my dear. For one thing, your mother, for one thing, your mother will stop dragging you from man to man if she thinks you have secured my interest. That's probably true. Rather conceited of you, Daphne mused, but true. Simon ignored her jib. Secondly, he continued, men are always more interested in a woman if they think other men are interested. Meaning, meaning quite simply, and pardon my conceit, he shot her a sardonic look to show that he hadn't missed her earlier sarcasm. But if all the world thinks I intend to make you my duchess, all of those men who see you as nothing more than an affable friend will begin to view you in a new light. Because they vain. Her lips pursed, meaning that once you throw me over, I shall have hordes of suitors in my beck and call. Oh, I shall allow you to be the one to cry off, he said gallantly. He noticed that she didn't bother to thank him. I still think I'm gaining much more from this arrangement than you, she said. He squeezed her arm slightly. Then you'll do it? Daphne looked at Miss Featherington, who looked like a bird of prey, and then at her brother, who looked as if he swallowed a chicken bone. She'd seen those expressions dozens of times before, except on the faces of her own mother and some helpless potential suitor. Yes, she said, her voice firm. Yes, I'll do it. What do you suppose is taking them so long? Violet Bridgerton tugged at her eldest son's sleeve, unable to take her eyes off of her daughter, who appeared to have thoroughly captured the attention of the Duke of Hastings. Here we go. I don't know, Anthony replied, looking gratefully at the back of the Featheringtons as they moved on to their next victim. But it feels as if it's been hours. Do you think he likes her? Violet asked excitingly. Do you think our Daphne truly has a chance to be a duchess? Anthony's eyes filled with a mixture of impatience and disbelief. Mother, you told Daphne she wasn't even to be seen with him, and now you're thinking of marriage? I spoke prematurely, Daphne said with a blithe wave of her hand. Clearly, he is a man of great refinement and taste. And how, may I ask, do you know what I said to Daphne? Daph told me, of course, Anthony lied. Hmm. Well, I'm certain that Portia Featherington won't be forgetting this evening anytime soon. Anthony's eyes widened. Are you trying to marry Daphne off so that she might be happy as a wife and a mother, or are you just trying to beat Miss Featherington to the altar? So the Featheringtons, as we read on, they were quite different in the series than in the book. They really didn't have that much action in the book, except as like basically punching bags, to be honest with you, and to kind of contrast, uh, to set up and contrast Daphne and what was going on with her. But that was like the extent of their involvement. But anyway, um, the former, of course, Violet replied in a huff, and I am offended you would even imply otherwise. Her eyes strayed off of Daphne and the Duke for just long enough to locate Portia Featherington and her daughters. But I certainly shan't mind seeing the look on their faces when she realizes that Daphne will make the season's greatest match. Mother, you are hopeless. Certainly not. Shameless, perhaps, but never annoy him. Then she spotted Daphne and the Duke. I gotta pause because sometimes my thing says it's reconnecting or it's unstable. So I don't know if it stopped and you guys missed something. Okay. Uh, all right. Then she spotted Daphne and the Duke. Ah, oh, child, two more pages to go. Okay. Here they come. Anthony, behave yourself. Daphne, your grace. She paused as the couple made their way to their side. I trust you enjoyed your dance. Very much, Simon muttered. Your daughter is as graceful as she is lovely. Anthony let out a snort. Simon ignored him. I hope we may have the pleasure of dancing together again very soon. Violet positively glowed. Oh, I'm sure Daphne would adore that. When Daphne didn't answer with all possible haste, she added quite pointedly, wouldn't you, Daphne? Of course, Daphne said demurely. I'm certain your mother would never be so lax as to allow me a second waltz, Simon said, looking every inch the debonair Duke. But I do hope she will permit us to take a stroll around the ballroom. You just took a stroll around the ballroom, Anthony pointed out. Anthony's like, I don't like what's going on here. What's the deal? I don't like you messing with my sister. I know you, boo. Bro, I know you. So he already like, I don't like this. Simon ignored him again. He said to Violet, we shall, of course, remain in your sight at all times. Daphne was all innocent. Where we shall, of course, remain in your sight at all times. The lavender silk fan in Violet's hand began to flutter rapidly. I should be delighted. I mean, Daphne should be delighted, she snapped. Why is my connection unstable? I hope this is not pausing. Okay. And Anthony snapped, should take a dose of laudanum for clearly I am fevered. What the devil is going on? So he's not buying none of this. Anthony, Violet exclaimed. She turned hastily to Simon. Don't mind him. Oh, I never do, Simon said affably. Daphne, Anthony said pointedly, I should be delighted to act as your chaperone. Really, Anthony, Violet cut in. They hardly need one if they're going to remain in the ballroom. He's trying not to let them out of his sight. He's like, psh, we're not doing this. Oh, I insist. You two run along, Violet said to Daphne and Simon, waving her hand at them. Anthony will be with you in just a moment. Anthony tried to follow immediately, but Violet grabbed onto his wrist hard. What the devil do you think you're doing? She hissed. Protecting my sister from the Duke? He can't be that wicked. Actually, he reminds me of you. Well, if that's the case, he mad wicked. Violet patted him on the arm. Don't be so overprotective. If he attempts to spirit her out onto the balcony, I promise you may dash out to rescue her. But until that unlikely event occurs, please allow your sister her moment of glory. Anthony glared at Simon's back. Tomorrow I will kill him. Dear me, Violet said, shaking her head. I had no idea you could be so high strung. One would think, as your mother, I would know these things, especially since you're my firstborn, and thus I have known you for the longest of all my children. But is that Colin? Anthony interrupted, his voice strangled. Violet blinked, then squinted her eyes. Why, yes, it is. I could hardly believe my eyes when I saw him an hour ago. In fact, I'd better go to him, Anthony said quickly. He looks lonely. Goodbye, mother. Violet watched as Anthony ran off, presumably to escape her chattering lecture. Silly boy, she murmured to herself. None of her children seemed to be on to any of her tricks. Just blather on about nothing in particular, and she could be rid of any of them in a trice. Her daughter, now on the other side of the ballroom, her hand nestled comfortably in the crook of the Duke's elbow. Okay, well, let's rewind that. She let out a satisfied sigh and resumed her watch of her daughter, now on the other side of the ballroom, her hand nestled comfortably in the crook of the Duke's elbow. They made a most handsome couple. Yes, Violet thought, her eyes growing misty. Her daughter would make an excellent duchess. Then she let her gaze wander briefly over to Anthony, who was who was now right where she wanted him, out of her hair. She allowed herself a secret smile. Children were so easy to manage. Who? Whose children? When they older, they easy to manage. Because right now, mine not easy to manage. But I digress. Then her smile returned to a frown as she noticed Daphne walking back towards her on the arm of another man. Violet's eyes immediately scanned the ballroom until she found the Duke. Dash it all, what the devil was he doing dancing with Penelope Featherington? And that is chapter 5. I'll be back to read chapter 6. And so I did summarize. I did summarize. I posted about it if you want to. I posted about So I did a blog post about the movie, the Netflix series, and the slight difference. I will do another reading with commentary, maybe tomorrow if I get a chance. So thanks and enjoy, and have a great. Oh shoot, it's 12:53 a.m. Have a great morning.